welcome back to the next part of the Firebase chat app in Swift. In today's part, we're going to be learning how to integrate a login with Facebook to our app. And additionally, we're going to look at how to log the user out because resetting the simulator is getting super old. So let's get started by opening up the project folder here, and let's open up the workspace. So let's first do the logout, and we're going to set it up pretty simply, and then we'll look at the Facebook login. So right now we've got our conversation view controller, which is this red controller, and in the last video we left off with our user Joe Smith signed in, so we are still signed in here. And what I'm going to do now is set up a little bit of the application's navigation. So we want a tab bar here, one for our conversations and one for some settings. So to do that, we are going to open up the views folder here and storyboard, and we're going to go to the main.storyboard. So this controller is the current main entry controller, and what we want to do is we want it to be a part of a tab bar controller. So you're going to select it, come up here to editor, and we want embed in navigation controller first and foremost. Now that this is in a navigation controller, we want to scroll out a little bit so we can have some more room here. Come up here and search for a tab bar controller and drag this guy in. And by default, it will have these two controllers connected to it. And we're going to select them one by one and just hit backspace to delete, like so. And let's organize this a little bit more. So this is the tab controller. This is one navigation controller. Here is the root view controller for that screen. And we are going to want to control drag from the tab controller to this controller, which is the navigation. And we're going to select this option. The relationship will be via view controllers. And you notice this one tab popped up here. We want to find another navigation controller, drag this guy in, and again, this gives us a default root controller. In this case, it's a table view controller, so we're just going to get rid of that there and put this here. And before we drag it to the tab controller to be our second tab host, we're going to find a basic UI view controller, drag it in, and we're going to connect the nav controller by control dragging from that to this controller, and the relationship will be root. And let's align these like so. And then let's drag from the tab controller to the second nav, and the relationship is view controller. And next up, we're going to select this tab controller, open up the attributes inspector, and we want to check this box for is initial view controller. And if you build and run now, you'll see that you have two tabs at the bottom, and there will be a navigation bar as well. So our screen should still be red if it decides to load. Give it a second. There it goes. We've got our two tabs down here. We don't really have any icons or proper names set up, but we've got the skeleton, if you will, in place. So I'm simply going to name these tab items. So let me zoom in here, and we're going to call this one chats, and then this one here we will call, I guess we can call this either profile or settings, and I'll go with profile. The other thing we want to do is give a title to both of these screens. So let me first close the console so we can see a little bit more of what's going on. And we can actually select the nav bar for this first screen. And in the attribute inspector, we're going to give this a title of chats, and then select the second one and call this profile. And you also want to select this controller, and we're going to update its class. So in the very first video, if you recall, we created a profile view controller. We're going to update that in here once you've selected it. In the attributes inspector, select this tab and change the class to be profile view controller. This way we can reference this controller via the code, And the other thing that I like to do, and this is entirely cosmetic, is select the nav controller that owns both of these controllers, the subcontrollers. And what I like to do is check this box for prefers large title. And what that does is it makes this title large down here. More of the Apple way to do things in the newer iOS design. So I think it looks a little nicer. And this is what we will be working with. So go ahead and hit Command R to build and run. Let's make sure our title is showing up here for both of these. And we're going to get rid of this red background because it's starting to not look great. So let's actually add an option here for the user to log out. And we're going to use a table view to build their profile. And I'm not going to build the whole profile in this video, but because we want that option, let's just drag one in like so. And we're going to want to add some constraints. So go ahead and select the table view and select this and pin the table view 0 all the way around. And let's go get rid of that red background color here in the conversation view controller. In the profile view controller, where you can get rid of all this commented code that was added by creating the file. And we're going to quickly set up this Logout button and our outlet. So like I mentioned in the beginning of this series, we're going to do some of the UI via outlets in the storyboard and some via just code like the login screen and the register screen. And the reason being is I want to give you guys a good spectrum of what's available to you guys for designing things. And I also want to paint the picture of pros and cons for both approaches. So let's go ahead and supply a data source and a delegate as self for the table view. You can ignore the errors for now. It's just yelling that we are not conforming. And we're going to add an extension here for the class. And it's going to conform to the table view delegate and the table view data source. You'll see the errors will go away like so. And what else do we want? So for now, we just want that one logout option. So we're going to say let data, and this will just have one option here. And we're going to say number of rows is return the number of elements in data. And cell for row, we are going to dequeue a cell off of the table view with an identifier of cell for index path. We're going to say the cell's text label text is that element in the data array. And because we know this is only logout right now, we're going to return this, and before it, we are going to style this a little bit just so it doesn't look as bad. So let's make that cell, and we're going to say cell.textLabel.text alignment will be centered, and we're also going to set the text color here to be red. And we also want something to occur once we tap this cell, in this case logging out. So we're going to implement did select row at index path. And just to zoom out so you guys can see the code in its entirety, we want to first say table view deselect row at index path with an animation. This will simply unhighlight the cell. And now we want to tell Firebase to log out the user. So we need to import Firebase auth. And in here, we're going to say in a do catch block, Firebase auth.auth.auth.signout. And I believe we need to call try because this can throw. So if you hit Command B, your app should be compiling. Hopefully, if I didn't break anything, make sure the simulator is the one that you want. So we've been sticking, I believe, with this one. And if this doesn't work for whatever reason, we can simply print out failed to log out. And if the user does in fact log out, we want to once again show that login screen. So what I'm going to do is go to the conversation view controller, and this is basically what we want to do once the user has signed out. So copy that bit of code and throw it in here. Highlight and Control I to fix the indentation. Hit Command B. And let's give this a go. And actually, we forgot to do one thing. We're using this cell ID here, but we haven't registered it for the table view, and we also haven't connected the outlet. So let's first say table view register I standard UI table view cell dot self table view cell dot self for this identifier. And let's go to the table view on the storyboard and just connect the outlet. And that's on this profile screen. So right click this and drag from this table view outlet. If I can grab it, whoops, third time's the charm, there we go, to our table view and connect it like so. Now let's hit Command R and see if we can sign out. Okay, cool. So no more red screen. And let's hit this. And we have our Logout button right here. If we select this, you'll see that we are now brought back to the login screen. And if we close the app and reopen, we should stay here because we have now appropriately logged the user out. One thing that I don't like is this login screen kind of just flashes. We want to show it with an animation. And the other thing I'm going to do is we want to show a alert for the user to just confirm that they want to log out so they don't accidentally hit it and unintentionally log out. So what we're going to do is actually, before we copy and paste that, let's create an alert here. And this is going to be an alert controller with a title, a message, and a style of, let's just say, action sheet. And we're going to say alert, add action, UI alert, action, this one here. And this is going to have a title of log out. Style will be destructive, which is a weird name, but it's the item that looks red. It has a red color to the title, just to notate to the user that it's a destructive action. I don't know if destructive is the best word for it, but that's what Apple called it. And this is going to be the action that gets fired once it's selected. And we're going to say present. And let's actually rename this to be action sheet, action sheet. We want to present the action sheet, animated true. And let's take all of this bit here and we're going to paste it on in here. Highlight and Control I to fix indentation. We want to make sure we use weak self in the closure to ensure we don't get stuck in a retention cycle, a retain loop for memory. We want to unwrap self to strong self. And now we can call these present functions off of strong self, like so. And let's see, what else do we need? We're presenting this action sheet. The other thing I'll mention for now, in case some of you guys are testing this on an iPad, an action sheet needs some other code to be properly presented on an iPad. And we're going to be building this out as we go in an iPhone simulator. So if this starts crashing on an iPad, that's kind of me hinting, use an iPhone. We're going to come back to this when we test this whole thing once we're done on an iPad. So go ahead and hit Command R to build and run. And actually, we forgot to do one more thing in here. Let's also add a cancel option to this action sheet in case the user doesn't want to log out. So we're going to say add action one more time. And it's going to be an alert action. Title will be cancel. Style is cancel. And handler is nil. So now hit Command R one more time. Let's sign in with Joe's account, which is joe@gmail.com. Password is password. Hit this. We should successfully sign in. If we close the app and reopen, we should remain signed in. We should be able to come here now, hit log out, get this nicer looking action sheet, and then hit this. And here is our login screen again, back to what gets shown when we first open the app. And let's make sure this stays. All right, perfect. Cool. So that took a few more minutes than I anticipated, but anyways, let's jump right into Facebook login. So what I want you to start by doing is head on over to developer.facebook.com, and we need to set up the Facebook SDK through their portal here, and then we can hook it into Firebase. And here we also have the Firebase docs pulled up for the Facebook integration in case I break something along the way. So go ahead, log into your Facebook. You're going to hit the drop down for My Apps and just hit Create New App, and you'll get to the screen that I'm on right now. So let's go ahead and call this My Messenger. And hopefully this won't complain because Messenger is a Facebook trademark technically. So let's see, let's hit this to continue. We're not a robot. Oh, great, we have to do one of these. Okay, so bear with me 1 second. Let me go through this and I'll be right back in a second. That image captcha gave me less issue than I anticipated it would. So we're just gonna hit continue here. And here we are on our dashboard for our Facebook app. And we want to start integrating the Facebook login here. So go ahead to this tile and hit setup. And we wanna integrate for iOS. And the first thing it wants us to do is bring in the Facebook SDK to our application. And there are a variety of ways in this dropdown that we can bring it in. So we're going to be leveraging CocoaPods to bring it in since all of our dependencies are being done in CocoaPod for our case. So go ahead and select that. And this is the dependency we want to bring in. So go ahead and copy that, jump back to Xcode and open up terminal. You want to cd into your project and open the pod file. And in here, what I like to also do is use this pound to add comments to divide this up, since we're going to add quite a few dependencies as we continue down this course. So we're going to say Facebook, if I can spell it correctly. And let's paste that on in. Lowercase that p, close text edit and run pod install. And bear with this, and while this installs, we're going to head on over to our project navigator and grab this bundle ID. And let's see if this is done installing. So cool, this is successfully installed. The reason we grabbed our bundle ID is because we're going to want to insert it here in just a moment. So this tells us to just run pod install. We did that. We are going to continue. And I think it wants our bundle ID next. So go in here, paste, select, continue. Rather save, then continue. I don't know why they did it that way, but anyways. Let's see, now what does it want us to do? Single sign-on. We're going to skip this and just hit next. And here, it wants us to do something pretty important. We want to hit this button to copy these keys and values. And we want to come back to Xcode and update our info plist. And I'll explain what this is in a second. So go to your info plist, right-click, open as source code. It's the same plist as represented in code. It's easier to edit for obvious reasons. And come down here before the closing of the dictionary and paste in what you copied. And if you just kind of read through this, it essentially just includes the identifiers for your Facebook app instance. And I think there is another bit that we need to bring in to our plist. If we scroll down a little bit, yeah, we also need this. And if we copy that and paste it over here, this includes the allow list that of apps and things that we're allowing Facebook to open from our native iOS app. So paste that in there and just hit open as property list to make sure everything looks correct over here. If you have a syntax error when you're editing that code, your property list won't open. So this is a nice little way to just validate that it's correct. Anyways, we're going to move on. So next, and now what does it want us to do? Now it's basically just going to give us a bunch of code that it wants us to add into our AppDelegate and all that good stuff. So one option is to just copy all of this and paste it in. I guess we can do that, it doesn't hurt. So let's copy this, head to our AppDelegate, and what I guess I'm gonna do is paste it down here. And what we also want to do is make sure when we delete all of this that we don't forget to re-add this line for Firebase. So you can go ahead and we're going to delete this comment. Let's delete all of this. And now we have a redundant import of UIKit, so get rid of that. So an application did finish launching with options. Don't forget to put this back in here again. And just hit Command R to build and run and make sure your Firebase integration didn't break. So it might take a few seconds to build now since we just brought in the Facebook library. So it's just compiling all of that source. So bear with it. And while that goes, actually, I'm just going to continue here. And I wonder if I can, look at that, so much easier to read. We are going to skip this part of it. So this is related to the scene delegate. I'm going to be lazy and skip this. We're going to continue here. And the next bit is our view controller. So we're going to copy this. And we also want the relevant import for FB SDK login kit. Okay, so this compiles and runs, no crashes, which means we're in good shape. Go to your login controller and start by importing that Facebook login kit. So FB SDK login kit. It's an interestingly long name they picked for it. And let's go to view did load. And let's paste in that login button code. Control I to fix indentations. And let's see, we want to add this to the scroll view. And actually, I'm going to make this a global subview like we did for all the other subviews. And we're also going to make this private, similar to the other subviews here. And we're adding it to the scroll view, which looks good to me. And we're going to add this below the login button in terms of the frame. So we're going to say the rather, let's do it this way. The center of this is the scroll view.center, and the frame.origin.y is going to be login button.bottom plus 20. And hopefully I can assign that. Looks like it didn't color tokenize. So let's hit Command R and see if it yells at us. I have a feeling it will. Looks like an error occurred up here. Let's see, what did we mess up here? Login button, because we already had another login button. So let's make this Facebook login button, just to discern it. And go ahead and change this. Go ahead and change this and this. And now everything should highlight properly. Hit Command R to build and run. And we should see our Facebook login button here. So it's kind of small. And it shouldn't be. So what we'll actually do is, instead of being lazy and just assigning the Y, we'll copy the framing for the login button, and we are going to just update it to be the Facebook login button's frame, and the Y will be the login button.bottom plus this buffer. Hit Command R to build and run, and the button should be the same size now as that, albeit the actual text and Facebook logo are small, but let's ignore that for a little bit. And when we tap it, let's see what we get. So we get the alert to continue. If we continue here, you'll see that my messenger is requesting to sign in. And there's a few things we need to understand. So the first thing is, when we first set up the email password, when we first set up the email password login here, we are creating users in Firebase. So when a user signs in with Facebook, rather continues with Facebook, we still need to make sure that the email that is associated with that Facebook user doesn't already exist. If that email exists in our database before, we want to sign the user in with a Firebase credential. If they don't exist, we want to sign them up with a Firebase credential. And there is a bit of handling we need to do around that. So the first thing we want to do is essentially get if the login was successful, as well as set up the scopes to request from Facebook. So we're going to set up a delegate for this button. And if you notice here, this is a login button delegate. And this will be self. So come down to the very bottom here, we're going to add an extension to the login view controller for a login button delegate. And I believe there's 2 required functions on here that we should get an error for. So hit that and hit fix. Looks like there's only 1 required function for a login button did complete with results. And let's command click into this result and see what's the type of this result here. So it looks like this result is a class, and the result has a canceled, a token, and all this stuff here. So what we're going to do is get the token out of the results. So we're going to say guard let token equals results dot token, which is an optional access token. And I think there's a string off of here, dot token string, else return, and we will print out user failed to log in with Facebook. And once we have this token here, we can create a credential and pass that to Firebase. And let me see why this is complaining. Looks like there's another function that it wants. There we go. That's the other one I was thinking of earlier. So if the login button was tapped to log out. So what Facebook does behind the scenes is if it detects that a Facebook user is signed in, the button will automatically be updated to show log out. In our case, it's not applicable since we won't show the login view controller. So we'll just do no operation. But it is a required function. We have this warning here because we're not using this access token yet. We need to trade this access token to Firebase to get a credential. So we're going to say Facebook, I believe it's auth provider. And we want a credential. So Facebook auth provider. And we want a credential with an access token, and it wants the access token as a string here. And in our guard let, we unwrapped that string into token. And let me just make sure this doesn't return optional. So if we start typing this again, this will return a auth credential, which looks correct, non-optional. And now we want to trade this auth credential for a, rather use this auth credential to sign the user in, because we traded the credential for a Firebase credential. So we can say auth.auth.auth sign in, and we want to sign in with a credential. So I believe this is the one we want. Pass in that credential, and the completion is no different than the email password mechanism. So I believe this has a auth result and a error. And if we hit Command B, we should be compiling. There we go. We're compiling here. And there is additionally some other stuff we have to handle related to multi-factor authentication. So if a Facebook user has MFA set up for their account, and MFA, if you're not familiar, is something in which the Facebook platform will say, hey, we've sent a text to your phone, type in the code, or we called you or emailed you. We need to handle that here as well, because Firebase won't be able to log the user in via the credential because that second layer of security is needed. I believe my personal Facebook does have it set up, which sets us up nicely to also implement that. But anyways, let's see. We also want to, on this button, this Facebook login button, set up some scopes. So what I'm going to do is have this be the type. And similar to the other subviews above, we're going to do it in this format. And we're going to specify button dots, are they scopes or permissions? Permissions, and it's an array of strings. So we want the user's email, email and public profile. And I'm assuming that's what it is. The public profile will include the first name and last name that we want, and the email is self-explanatory. And I'm not sure if we need a space in here, but let's see what happens if we try to log the user in with Facebook. In this closure, what I'm going to say is if guard let results equals auth results and error is nil, else we're going to return, and I'm going to print Facebook credential login failed, MFA may be needed. Otherwise, we're going to print successfully logged user in, and we're going to dismiss the login screen similar to what we do in the other login function over here. And this reminds me we should use strong self. So let's put this in here. And over here, we are going to say weak self. And here we'll say guard let strong self equals self, else return. It's complaining that we're not using this auth result, so instead of doing an if let or a guard let, we'll simply say make sure this isn't nil. And if we hit Command B, we should be compiling now. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Command R to build and run. Hit the Facebook button. We get the prompt, hit this, and I'm going to type in my Facebook credentials and be right back in 2 seconds. So I just signed in to my Facebook account on the simulator, and like I mentioned, I have multi-factor auth set up. So I got a notification on my phone, and I'm going to hit accept over here, and now it's asking me if I want to remember this device. So we'll say save, continue on my device here, and we should be able to continue here now. And now you see it automatically went here, and it's saying my messenger is requesting access to your name, public profile, and email. And that's what we want. We're not allowing any access to actually post. So we're going to continue here. And if you notice down here, what actually occurs in the print statement is Facebook credential login failed, MFA may be needed. So it looks like we came into this block, which is what I anticipated would happen. So let's actually see what error is occurring. So what I should have done actually, which probably was smarter, was let's actually also interpolate. Let's interpolate the error in here. And this error is optional. So let's actually do a if let error equals error. Man, I really can't type today. And if this occurred, we can actually check for that said error, and we can handle it appropriately. So go ahead and hit Command R one more time to build and run. We should still be logged out because the login was not successful. Hit this, and you see that the actual Facebook login failed, but the Firebase login didn't fail. So this is a logout button. So go ahead and log out. Hit this again. You'll get the pop-up here. And we're still logged in. It remembered our session. Go ahead and clear the console with the Command K. And again, accept over here. And we see that Facebook successfully logged in, but we're not logged in. And if we come down here and read this, we can see that what we need to do is enable the configuration for Facebook sign-in in our console, which was a total oversight on my part. So actually what we need to do is really simple. Head on over to your Firebase console, go to authentication, and we want to go to this, and we want to enable Facebook. So similar to how we enabled email password, select Facebook and turn this guy on right here. And let's see, we're just going to hit save. Looks like it requires us to bring in the app ID and app secret. So we're going to grab that from the console here on Facebook. So we can simply continue, and I'm going to ignore all this. Just keep continuing, and eventually you'll be done with this. And on the left side here, let's go to our dashboard, maybe, is where we can find it. And let's see, secret, nope. Or app ID, I guess here's our app ID that we want. So copy that. And let's go back to Firebase, and let's paste in the app ID here. And app secret. Let's see if I can remember where to find the app secret. So let's go back here, and let's see. I could have swore it was on this page, but then again, Facebook changes this every day. So let's open up settings, and maybe it's under advanced. Let that load. So secret. Okay, here's some secret stuff. Requires app secret. That's not what we want. So let me pause the video and look around this console to find the secret, and then I'll be right back in 2 seconds. I found the secret here right after I paused the video. It was actually under basic, and you have to press show. It asks for your Facebook password, and then it will show it. So let's copy that. Come back to the Firebase console and paste this guy in here, and let's hit this one more time, and cool. So we're in business. That's now enabled. So yeah, so that's the thing that I totally forgot to do. So let's try this one more time. I still have a hunch that once we log in again, it's a Command R, we might come in here again because MFA, multi-factor authentication, might yell at us to reconfirm. So let me empty out the console here with a Command K, accept this, and actually it doesn't complain. It actually successfully not only logged in Facebook, but also successfully logged in Firebase to our application, and we saw the login screen disappeared. So go ahead and hit Command R. We should still be logged in, like so. Awesome. And the issue rather the other thing we need to do, it's not really an issue because we haven't done it yet, is if you go to your database, you'll see that I just logged in with my Facebook account. So there should be an account for myself here with my email and my first name and last name, but there's not. So the reason there's not is because we didn't make that database call, and we need to get that data out of Facebook. So, and we also need to check if that user's email isn't already in our database before we make that entry. So let's go ahead and do that now. So before we actually trade this credential, this token for a credential in Firebase, we want to actually call a Facebook graph request and get the user's email and name out of the current logged in user. So we're going to do that here, and we're going to say let Facebook request is a FB SDK login kit dot graph request, and we're going to create this with, I believe, this constructor. It has a few parameters. The graph path is me. Parameters will be a dictionary where the key is fields, and the key and the value for this key is going to be email, comma name. The token will be the token string that we unwrapped in the guardlet statement right above here. And let's see, version, we're just going to say nil. And the HTTP method is going to be a get, like so. And we can now simply call Facebook request.start. And the completion, I think, has 3 parameters. Let's actually click into it instead of me assuming. So let's say start, and it's a graph request block, which isn't helpful. So let's actually command click into this, and we'll see that this is the completion type. So let's click into this. If it lets us, perfect. And there are 3 parameters that are coming in: a connection, a result, and an error in that order. So let's go back to where we were writing our code. And we know now there is a connection, result, and an error here. Not too sure what a connection is, so let's just do underscore to make it discardable. And what we want to make sure in here is that the result equals the result, so unwrap that. The error is nil. Otherwise, in the else, we're going to return, and we will print out failed to make Facebook graph request. And if memory serves, the result should be a dictionary, and we're going to say this as string any. And we want to grab the email and the name out of that dictionary. So we're going to say, let's actually just print it out for now. So I don't exactly remember what those keys are. So let's just print out this result. And as far as all of this stuff goes, we're going to move this inside of this other closure. Because in here, once we get the email out, we're going to then use our database manager to make sure that the email is not already in the database. If it is, then we don't have to do the insertion. We can just log the user in. If it's not, we can do the insertion, then still log the user in. The thing to keep in mind is continue with Facebook is not a registration mechanism. That's why it's called continue, and that's kind of the notion that Facebook wanted to go for. So enough of me blabbering on. Let me log out here. And let's hit Command R to build and run one more time. And let's see if we get the data out once we sign into Facebook. So let's log out of that too. So that's something we should also do when the user logs out of the Firebase session. We should also log out Facebook. Otherwise, there's going to be a mismatch there. We'll do that in another part. But let's go ahead and clear our console here. Go back to this, continue here, and if we take a look at this, we see we do in fact get the result of the Facebook request. We get my name and my email address back, and then we also continue to sign us in. So instead of printing now, let's grab this data by saying guard let user name is in results, we want to get name as a string, and we also want to get their email in results. It is the key for email, again, as a string. Otherwise, we're going to return. And again, I'm going to put a print here. Fail to get email and name from FB results. And in case you haven't noticed already, I love to put these prints everywhere because it just helps in the development process, and we can always clean it up later on. Now that we have the name, notice it's the whole name for the user, not first and last. We can fix that up later, but for now, let's make an assumption that the user's first and last name has a delimiter of a space. So we can say name components is name separated by, or components separated by, let's see, username, that's what I called it, not just name. Components separated by a space. And let's just make sure that there are 2 components in here. So guard, the count of this is 2, else we can return. And this is a little bit of a dirty practice here, and I'm just doing it for the sake of getting it functional, but not to worry, we're going to come and clean all of this up later. So now what we can say is first name, is name components, the first component, and last name is the second component. And let me put some line breaks there just to clean this up a little bit. So now that we have all this data from the Facebook request, it's just giving us warnings because we have not used this data yet. We need to go through the database manager object we have. So we're going to say database manager shared, and we want to check if an email exists. So email exists for the email, and this email is coming from here, which is from the Facebook request, and completion will have our Boolean, I believe. So we're going to say if it doesn't exist, then we can go ahead and do the entry into the database. We don't need an else because that means the user already exists, and we can simply just continue here. So we're going to say if it exists, we're going to say database manager shared insert user, and we need to create this chat app user object here. So chat app user. Let's close my antivirus pop-up, and in here we have a first name, a last name, and an email address. So for the first name, let's pass in that first name we grabbed from Facebook above, last name, and email. And looks like there's no completion handler on here. Did we not put a completion handler on here? Let's click into this and just double check. So this simply creates a user with no completion handler. So in that case, we can leave this bottom code here as is. Let me highlight and fix all this indentation up a little bit. The Control I and hit Command B. Code should be building. Let's review this one more time before we hit run, just because I think it got a little dirty. So this whole function is the delegate function for when the Facebook login button did complete. We're going to unwrap the token from Facebook. Then we're going to make a request object to Facebook to get the email and name for the logged in user. Then we are going to execute that request. And now we basically want to get that email and name from Facebook back to the client app here. We are going to then unwrap that data. We're going to split the name to get the first name and last name out. And we are making an assumption that the name will just be their first and last. Now, obviously, there are people on Facebook that have multiple names, a middle name, etc., etc. So we're going to eventually modify this to get the first name and last name directly from Facebook instead of making this assumption here. After that, we're going to use our database manager object to check if the email exists in the database that we got from Facebook. If it doesn't exist, we're going to insert into the database, and this will continue to happen even if the user doesn't exist. It'll get dispatched, and then we're going to trade the access token from Facebook right here to get a Firebase credential. And then we're going to use that credential on Firebase auth to sign the user in. If an error occurs, we're just going to print it out here. Looks like we didn't hit that multi-factor authentication case that I originally thought we would. I'll have to read up on that and see if there's a way we can manually have it come into this case. Finally, off of strong self, as to not cause a memory leak, we use weak self here. We dismiss this navigation controller. So quite a bit of logic going on in this function. Maybe we'll split it up in the future, but go ahead and hit Command R to build and run, and let's make sure this is functional. So let's sign out from the Firebase session here, and then we also need to sign out Facebook, like so. Go ahead and clear this and hit Command R once more, just to make sure that we are still signed out as a sanity check. In your console now, you can navigate to authentication. You'll see actually we have another user here right below, or rather right above joe@gmail.com for our email. And this is from Facebook. So we did in fact actually register the user appropriately. But in our database, what we care about is in the real-time database, we don't have an entry for myself because even though I signed in, So we want a new entry for your user here. So go ahead and clear the console with the Command K, hit this button to sign in with Facebook, hit that to get the browser, authenticate it, and like so, it should log us in. But what we care about over here now in the database, we should have an entry for myself. So I've got my first name, my last name, my email address, and again, it uses a safe email address here, which is internal to how that function works. So we don't need to worry about that anymore. And like you saw already in authentication, or it already shows my user with my email address, and the provider is Facebook. And there you have it. Now you can log into your chat app with Facebook. So most people won't want to go and create an account in a real application. So you don't need to worry about people filling all this stuff out every time. It's still an option, still available to you, but now we can use Facebook. In the next part, before we work on Google sign in, we'll also take care of signing the user out of Facebook when they sign out of the Firebase authentication state on that profile page that we set up in the beginning of this video. So that said, thank you so much for watching. If you haven't smashed that like button down below already, please make sure you do so for the YouTube algorithm. Helps me make more videos for all of you, more series, all that good stuff. If you have any questions, comment down below. I reply to every single comment within a few days. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next part.